Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 2034. The topic is mindset, and the title is Success is Simple. I was talking with somebody recently, and we were talking about diet apps and different types of diets. And the common phrase, the common thought, and this seems to be pretty true, is the number one reason why diets fail is lack of consistency. People are not able to sustain the habits of the diet, so therefore they can't sustain continued results or even sustain the results they've gotten. The inability to be consistent is what causes diets to fail. Diets work short term because they create structure. And that structure is formed around principles that control caloric intake. Now, they might not use the word calories, they might use points, they might use, time blocks. There's going to be a lot of ways in which they'll do that. But in general, diets work because they create a controlled amount of energy intake, basically. So the specifics will vary. The key is finding the specifics that match your needs, your preferences. They match the way that you like to eat foods. So if you like a lot of fat-based foods, ketogenic diet or carnivore diet would be great. If you don't like a lot of fat-based foods, maybe you don't want animal products, so you're going to go with vegan or vegetarianism. If you have a certain schedule conflicts, maybe intermittent fasting will be better. There's a lot of ways in which the diets will be structured, but all of those diets will have a sense of energy control. So the amount of calories you're consuming is controlled in some way. That's why the diets work. But what allows them to work long term is we have to be able to be consistent with that. So not only we have to be consistent with the amount that we consume, and how we do that is the way in which we consume. If we're consistent with the way in which we consume our energy, then we'll be consistent with how much energy we're consuming, and then therefore we'll be consistent, and then that creates success. So consistency creates success. The next question then should be is how can you increase your chances of being consistent? How can you increase your consistency? The answer is to make it simple. 5 ways, and there's many more, but 5 ways in which I promote simplicity for clients when it comes to dieting. Number 1 is we use target ranges. Instead of a specific calorie number every day, so maybe you're following an app or you're following a diet structure and you're supposed to consume 1,743 calories a day. It's not going to happen. In the real world, you're not going to be able to get down to a singular number every single day. One way a person would do that would be is to eat the exact same foods every day, but that's clearly not sustainable. That's not something we can be consistent with long term. You're going to have to create more options, more variety. Life is going to get in the way where your typical foods aren't available. Schedule is going to be changing. There's a lot of reasons why we can't be consistent down to a singular number every single day. And there are a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want to be. We might have a training day and a non-training day. We might have a day where we didn't work out, but we were out in the yard gardening, doing lawn care, doing a bunch of activity. Maybe we went to the mall and walked around for a bit. Or we had a day, it was a rainy Saturday, sat around and watched movies all day, which sounds wonderful. So you sat on your butt all day. There are going to be variable, there's going to be an inconsistency to the amount of calories we burn every day. Therefore, there's going to be variableness, like variety, to the amount of calories that we would need every day. We don't have a way currently to track our calorie usage all day, every day, like per hour of the day or per few hours of the day. So from one meal to the next meal, we can't be certain exactly to the singular calorie how many calories we have burned, and then that would therefore then tell us how many calories we need. So if there was a way to do that, that wasn't a calculation estimation. It was literally factual, like they're measuring things in your blood, and yeah, it'd be some crazy ordeal. But you could calculate and say, oh, okay, from this meal to this meal, I burned 476 calories, so I need exactly that many in my next meal. We don't have a way of doing that. We have guesstimations, so therefore we guesstimate our total daily calorie intake, but it does make sense that that would vary some. It would then make sense that our intake that we have per day would have an allowance for variableness. So when I write clients' programs, we might have a calorie goal of, say, 1,800 to 2,200 calories. On the days they're more active, eat a little higher in that range. The days you're less active, eat lower in that range. On the days you're more hungry, eat higher in the range. On days you're less hungry, eat lower in the range. We're going to allow some variableness, but there's still the known structure of that range. So we know if we're in that range most days, we're getting a caloric average by the end of the week. So if you take all 7 days divided by 7, you have a caloric average for the week. If we want our weight to go down, we bring the average down. If we want our weight to go up, we bring the average up. Now, there's manipulations you make in the individual macros if you're trying to stay the same weight, but maybe build muscle and lose fat at the same time. There are some varieties in how we do that. But we use ranges for calories, for protein. I usually use like an upper limit for sugar. So just, eat up to this amount, but try not to go over this amount. We use ranges because it is more real world applicable to how the body uses calories, and it's real world applicable to how we can actually intake calories. Meaning we're not going to be able to eat to the exact singular number every single day, the exact same number of calories. Again, the only way you're going to do that is by eating the same foods all the time, but that is not very likely to be able to be consistent with for as long as you want to have the results, which will be the rest of your life. So we're trying to find that balance of consistent enough, structured enough, but there's enough variety, enough wiggle room in there that we can kind of modulate and make changes along the way when life demands us to do so. A second way we do that, it's how we create simplicity in our nutrition, is to use time blocks. Too often people worry about like tracking everything's per 24 hours. They try to track a whole day. That can be very challenging because by dinner you can forget what you had for breakfast, or you forget that you had a mid-morning snack because you were super busy and you kind of just ate it while you're doing something else, so you forget to track it. Or people are kind of looking at a whole day going, oh gosh, I don't have time at 3 in the afternoon to put in my breakfast, my mid-morning lunch, my like regular lunch. Maybe I had a coffee. They're like, I'm super busy. I don't have time to enter all this. So they end up doing it the next morning. So they'll enter their food the day after, but then they find out that they were off. So they were too low on calories, too high on calories, too low on protein. But it's now after the fact, and they can't really fix that and adjust that. It's better to kind of track as we go so we can modify as we go. The way in which I like clients to do that is using time blocks. We focus on 6 hours of the day. So the first 6 hours of being awake, you're going to eat a third of your calories in protein. The second 6 hours of being awake, you're going to eat a third of your calories in protein. The final roughly about 6 hours of being awake, you're going to eat a third of your calories in protein. So we typically sleep 6 to 8 hours a day. That means we're awake for 16 to 18 hours. If we think about it on the 18-hour range, that means we got 6, 6, 6. So 6-hour blocks. Yeah, so if you just track things per 6 hours, you really are only tracking per 1 or 2 meals. And that is much easier. You can track that in an app, or you can actually track it on just mentally. That's actually what I do. Is I know one of my normal meals is 2 cans of rice with a microwavable pouch of, 2 cans of tuna with a microwavable pouch of rice. And then I use, you're going to feel free to judge me because it probably sounds gross, but Catalina dressing. I know, it's weird. I hate tuna, but it's quick and easy and it gives me some protein. So I'll use 2 cans of tuna, microwavable pouch of rice, some Catalina dressing. It comes out to like I think it's 800 calories and 60 grams of protein. I know that. I actually have it in my phone, so I don't actually. That's funny because if you ask me if I'd always memorized, I'd say yes. Then all of a sudden I have to say them. I'm like, oh crap, do I? So I have tuna and rice meal written down on how many calories and protein it is. I have chicken and rice. I have a shake that I make with Greek yogurt and fruit juice. I have a couple other options as well of foods that I will commonly have. And I have them just on a notes feature in my phone. And if I ever kind of like, I'm like, oh, okay, I need this time block, I'm going to need 1,200 calories. Okay, well, if I do the tuna and rice, it's going to give me 800. I know then later on I can do that shake, that's going to give me 500. I'll be 100 over, but I'm going to be low on lunch, so I'll eat a smaller lunch and make that up. So I'm just making it up as I go. But as I go, I'm adding calories, subtracting calories, adding protein, subtracting protein. I'm only having to modify things 1 to 2 meals at a time, not an entire day at a time. So it doesn't seem so overwhelming. When you practice doing this, and I've had clients do this for years now, is they're like, hey, this is like freeing, this is life changing, because I know I only have to look at what I'm doing every 1 or 2 meals. And they end up eating within usually like 2, 3, maybe 4 different options for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. But whenever they have something that's off plan, that's not normal, they then know, okay, I got to go ahead and add that in just to try to double check and see where I'm at. But they're only having to check maybe 1 meal a day or 1 meal every other day, not every single meal, every single day, all day, all day. So time blocks helps to make it super simple. We also do known meal options. So we would say, okay, what are some common breakfasts that give us enough calories and enough protein? Let's make sure we have those foods on hand. And if we have, say, 3 options that we know work, pick between those 3. Be consistent with it. Unfortunately, what I see is people will eat very randomly. I looked at somebody's food journal just a couple days ago, and across 10 different days, they had 10 different breakfasts. It wasn't planned, which was kind of the downside, and that was a bummer for them. They're not doing very well with consistency because they're brand new to this stuff. But one day they had, like, say, a protein shake, a bagel, and some eggs. The next day they just had the protein shake and eggs. The next day they just had the bagel, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, why are we having some of the pieces on some days and not on other days? And then another day they just had coffee and walked out the door, and we then find out, okay, the next day they had 2 packets of nuts in a trail mix thing. And I'm like, well, why didn't you have the trail mix on the day you had the coffee? Because we definitely didn't have enough calories when we just had coffee. So what we need to do in that case is say, okay, here are 2 or 3 different breakfasts that I like, that give me the calorie and protein I need. Let me have those things on hand. So that way, if I wake up and have enough time for the breakfast, for the bagel and eggs, great. If I don't have any time, I can grab the nuts and the trail mix and drink some coffee and be out the door. Maybe throw a little bit of MCT oil in the coffee and get a little more calories in if we need it. But the idea is to pick a few options per meal and cycle through those options so you have consistency. Another 4th thing that we do that creates simplicity in our nutrition is freedom of choice. We know that for a significant amount of time, people really just need to track their calories and their protein. When I have clients who get ready for strength-based competitions like powerlifting, if they're relatively new to powerlifting, they're not, there's a stage in which you progress and get better to where you're going for elite totals and, like national world records, and your nutrition really does matter. It gets down to the nitty gritty of what type of carbohydrate to eat, what type of protein to eat, and exactly when. But before you get to that level where you're going for elite totals and whatnot, it really doesn't matter much. Whether you have rice or potatoes or pasta or bread, who cares? So we allow for freedom within the carb and fat and protein choices. Now, we just don't want to eat, a bag of Oreos and call that a good meal. It's not. But does it matter if we have rice versus potato versus pasta? No, not really. So we want to have freedom of choice so that way it allows us to be consistent over time and we don't feel boxed in with these singular meals. And then if we don't eat that meal, We just think, screw it, we don't count anything, and we just kind of wreck the whole day. So if we know that we have the choice between, say, rice, potatoes, and pasta, you would say, okay, I can have a pouch of rice, or I can have 200 grams of potatoes, or I can have, like so many ounces of pasta. You would know that those are your options, and you would choose those based on whichever you felt like having that day. So maybe one meal you're going to have chicken, another meal you're going to have turkey. So maybe you like a certain type of carb with a certain type of meat, and you can kind of mix and match that. That works really well when people are making foods for families because the family doesn't want to eat the same thing every day. So you want to have some variety, but not lose the context of structure within knowing how many calories and grams of protein you're consuming within that variety. But having the variety helps, having the freedom of choice helps. And then the fifth tip is to use things like Instacart and Amazon. If you have those available where you live, they're great because they just kind of, Amazon, you can get things shipped to you. Instacart, you can have somebody grocery shop for you and bring it to you. And that can allow people to be a little more consistent, especially with things that are like quick options. So okay, if I'm late for breakfast and I don't eat breakfast, it'd probably be helpful for me to have maybe some protein bars on hand or trail mix or some like individual packets of like nut butter, like almond butter or peanut butter. Just get that stuff on Amazon and have it sent to you. The chances of you going to the grocery store and trying to get that on time, you're not likely to make the time for it. Plus, it does take a lot of time. It can take time depending on your schedule. So having services like Instacart and Amazon, they really do help in regards to allowing you to have things on hand and more consistently, and then therefore you can be more consistent with what you eat. So those are just 5 examples of how we create simplicity in our nutrition. Is target ranges, time blocks, known meal options, freedom of choice, and then services like Instacart and Amazon. And then the same thing is true for training. We have to create consistency in our training. When I have people who focus on fat loss, if they're a relatively sedentary person, like they have a long hours desk job, I'll have them do like a standing desk because that gets them up and active and gets them moving around a little bit. We'll even wear something that counts like step count, whether that's a wristwatch or their phone in their pocket, something that we can get an idea of step count. So that way we have basic overall, like a baseline activity of the day. It's not uncommon at all for somebody to have less than 2,000 steps in a day. And that's just not a lot of movement, which means they're going to have to work out more aggressively and longer and or eat significantly less. If we can just get that baseline of energy up, even to just 5,000 steps, that allows them to eat more, that allows their training to be less intense. So general movement is helpful, but creating simplicity and saying, hey, just buy this step counter thing. You can get a step counter that goes in your pocket for probably like $10 on Amazon. And say, hey, let's play a game. By 2 p.m., we would like to be at 2,000 steps. So if you check that at 2 p.m. and you're not there, let's stand for a bit. Go move your computer to the kitchen and stand at the desk, at the countertop. Maybe get on the desk, like standing desk elevator thing. We want to maybe take some phone calls while we're walking around the house or walking around if you have any ability to walk around outside. But we have to create movement, but that's a simple way to do it. It's just, hey, check your step count at 2 p.m., see where you're at, move around a little bit more if you're not there. Easy peasy. It's something that they can set as a reminder in their phone. They can put it in their work calendar. They can do anything they need. Maybe they get in the habit of every time after lunch, they check their step count and then they adjust if they need to. Anytime you go pee, check your step count. If you pair a new habit with an existing habit, especially something you have to do, you're going to have to pee sometime in your day. So pair a new habit with an existing habit, especially a habit that you have to do, and that can help create consistency with that new habit. So there are tricks and ways to set this stuff up. For fat loss, again, in training, we make their training simple for fat loss in that we always structure things in circuits. So I'll always put exercises in circuits. Not always, so I got to be careful on that. Sometimes we're going to work on a strength movement and I want them to take longer breaks so they can lift heavier, but that's maybe one movement in the entire workout. The rest of the workout is circuits. So we'll do circuits for greater volume in the training. Then Even if their goal is fat loss, we still do focus on strength. We make sure we have enough protein and muscle damaging activity in their training to create muscle growth, because both of those help invest into greater fat loss long term. We don't just want yo-yo type results where they lose a lot of weight and then they can't keep it off. We want stuff long term. So we're always going to be including strength and muscle building into our programming, even if the goal is fat loss. For clients that their goals are strength and muscle growth, we use intensity regulation to avoid injuries, because if you have an injury, you're going to be inconsistent in your training. We do technique reviews to avoid injury, so we can avoid inconsistency in our training. And we have appropriate workout lengths. I write the workouts to where it actually fits into the client's schedule. I have clients who are very successful in muscle building and or strength that only work out somewhere between 45 to 90 minutes. It's very uncommon for any of my clients to work out longer than 90 minutes. If they do, I would probably say, hey, you got to double check your rest times. You might be taking too long a rest. I would be surprised if any of my clients right now actually work out longer than 90 minutes if they're following my rest times. And that's elite level, high level, professional, high collegiate, like Olympic level, people who've done amazing things. And that's like the length of our workouts. So meaning, like, I've had clients come to me and they're like a powerlifter. They're like, oh man, I just can't do 3-hour workouts anymore. And I'm like, why the hell are you doing 3-hour workouts at all? And they would show me their previous program from the previous coach. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is a part-time job. You don't have 4 days a week where you can spend 3 hours in the gym. And that's 3 hours of activity. You talk about then you have to plan to get to the gym, come home from the gym. You're looking at 4 hours a night, and that's just not going to be feasible for a lot of people. So we make sure that the workout lengths are correct to fit into their schedule, so that way they can be consistent with those. There's a lot you can do in training structure to promote simplicity, which promotes consistency. Often, to be successful, people think in large, drastic measures. They think in big, bold efforts. But large, drastic measures, big, bold efforts aren't sustainable. You can maybe make a quick, significant difference, but you won't be able to be consistent, so therefore you'll lose those quick results. You'll become frustrated and you'll feel defeated. Success is a long-term game. You want to achieve it, but you also want to keep it. So the habits that create it must be maintained to sustain it. If you want to be successful, focus on making things simple. Simple may seem slower. Simple may seem boring. But simple sustains. Simple can be consistent. And consistency equals success. So that is the leaving message for today, is if you want to be successful, make everything you do as simple as possible. That is your focus. How can I make this as simple as possible so I can be consistent? Awesome. Well, if you have any questions, if you need anything, go to our website, www.brutalirongym.com. We have free nutrition information, free training information. We have all of our services listed on there. So if you want to work with me and I can help you make everything simple, just reach out on the website. We have a ton of ways to communicate on the website. But on the homepage, on the bottom of the homepage is a contact form. You can always send me a message there. And then if you like the podcast, please share the podcast. The more people we share it with, the more people we can help. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on the website. And if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you